Holla ballers and welcome to Eversong Woods, our first zone in Midnight. And this starts out with such a bombastic start, certainly compared to Donegal, where we were like, ooh, what's this new land? Who are these people? Let's introduce all these cultures. None of that this time. We're returning home to Silvermoon. I hope some of you like the Burning Crusade. I really do, because not just aesthetically, obviously we're in Silvermoon, we're in the Ghostlands and things like that. The style, the actual substance of this area is the Burning Crusade in more ways than you realize. It's actually crazy. For me, as somebody who's been around for such a long goddamn time, it was like traveling back in time. I was like, oh, this quest is exactly like something I would play in 2007. This is really weird. Now, for some of you, that's going to be great. For some of you, that's going to be like, oh, same old, same old. I will lean towards the same old, same old. Yes, it's got that nostalgia kick. But there's nothing new here. This is bread and butter WoW. Absolutely bread and butter WoW, which is not surprising. I did ask Maria when I had a chance to talk to her in Gamescom, how, when they try and mix up, I've been an advocate of this for years, like, can we have something slightly different than fill the bar, collect 6 bear asses and all that? And the vibe I get back, although she wouldn't say it directly, is that people just don't like that. They like their comfortable WoW blanket. Every now and again, we can do something that's a little different, but honestly, for the most part, people just like to almost brain AFK while playing World of Warcraft, and that means that they're kind of just doing the same thing. They play a ton of alts, they want it to be familiar, they want it to be comfortable, and so that's what you're going to get throughout all this zone. I'm not going to talk too much about experience gains here, besides a couple of tips, because last time we did that, including in the War Within, we got just weeks out from launch, if not a couple of weeks, and they just dramatically nerfed all the experience gains that you get from the zones. They're probably going to do that here as well. You could do like half the zone and reach 83. I'm pretty sure if the XP bar was working, we're currently locked to 83 on the alpha, is that if I was to do everything, I'd be like 85. I'd be halfway to the level cap in the first zone right now. One little tip I do want to give you, though, because this only for the moment appears during the intro cinematics. Let's talk about that a second. I'll come back to the tip. The intro cinematic follows on immediately after the cutscene, the trailer that we saw at Gamescom with Xal'atath going to the Sunwell. I had it confirmed in an interview, and it's been other sources now, that Xal'atath has made a beeline for the Sunwell for reasons. We don't really know what that is yet, but it's a first staging point of attack onto Azeroth is to attack the Sunwell, where they're repelling her, they're pushing her back, and you will get this enormous sky beam of Xal'atath attacking the Sunwell while the Sunwell itself is being, like, enchanted by paladins. They're whispering spells into it, which is shooting this beam up to hold back the oncoming desolate host, the devouring host, as Chris Metzen called it, that is trying to attack the Sunwell. What's those reasons? We don't really know. We have to imagine that the Sunwell is kind of the only thing that can stop her. Whether or not we'll end up destroying the Sunwell, or whether the Sunwell is a key to the World Soul, something like that is probably going to play out over the course of Midnight, but that's our current situation. Starts very well, actually, again, reminiscent of the Burning Crusade, where we just arrived into a war zone, but this is much more fleshed out with modern tech, similar to what we had with Warlords of Draenor. We're going to be going all the way through Silvermoon, in the older Silvermoon, and battling just forces, recruiting everybody we can. Let's make a united front while fighting against this devouring host, and fighting them all over the place. Now, coming back to the tip, because this is really fun. It's very cinematic. There's lots of giant Cthulhu-esque, Lovecraftian monsters spreading out. One thing I will say to Blizzard here is they've done a fantastic job of visually showing the fact that you cannot win. There's just so many things just pouring out of portals on top of you, that there's just no victory to be had through physical arms, right? Sword and shield are not going to hold the line here. There are 3 world event fill the bar areas in this area, okay? But they're only in this area, and once you complete this area is gone. You can't go there again. They currently provide a ludicrous amount of experience. Like, between the 3, that takes about a minute and a half each. They're a little out of the way, but about a minute and a half each. They're certainly far quicker than some of the quests that you have to do in that area. They're giving you like half an XP bar. Absolutely crazy amounts of experience come from these things. I've no doubt it's going to get turned off or like nerfed in some way. But if you're looking to just level as fast as possible, right? Some of you just like, I just want to level. I don't care about what's going on. I just want the experience so I can hit level cap and get on with my end game stuff. These are the things you're not going to want to miss out on, at least of now. I'll update you later if they change this, but it's very noticeable. If you've leveled just doing main story, you're going to be like halfway through the next zone before you actually, or the first main zone through the Eversong Woods before you hit your like first level. If you do this, you do it as you arrive at Silvermoon City. It's like pretty wacky in order to get there. So, lovely cinematic intro. Then we reach the brand new Silvermoon City. On the visual side of it, it is gorgeous. They do this wonderful bridge intro of you gliding into the new and improved Silvermoon City. It's currently very empty. There's a lack of life there, not just because of the lack of players in the alpha, but just lack of NPCs. As you browse around, endless just empty rooms, not been fleshed out. The details haven't been painted in yet, like the actual activity that's going on. They've basically put the quest givers in and a few vendors. So this place needs fleshing out because it's enormous. It's absolutely huge. But right now it feels a little lifeless. It feels like it's a work in progress, which is what we expect from the alpha. Then we start getting into the nuts and bolts of what your first zone is going to be. And again, I come back to the fact that this is a nostalgia hit of epic proportions. Everywhere you go, you're going to be doing things that you've probably seen since vanilla. You're going to be fighting like Naga and getting boxes along the beach side, just as you would do in the old times. Then you're going to go to like a forest area like you would see in Darkshore and do that kind of stuff. And the main crux and through thread of this story is that they have managed to make the Sunwell sort of explode and gush light energy to prevent Xal'atath from coming down with the Devouring Host, but that's had a side effect on nature. And that the light has infused the local area overwhelmingly so. Like it is just essentially poisoned the local area. And now the plants and the wildlife and things like that have mutated and become vicious and angry because they're filled with light. This allows for a lot of beautiful areas, for sure. But it is the standard questing you would expect to go along with that. The side effect of this is they're setting up a continuation. I shouldn't say setting up. They're continuing some theories and things that we saw in Hallowfall. And that is the supporters of Xal'atath. These are the worshippers, the cults. They're there as well. And that's actually where the story is going to divert. You're going to be like, oh my god, Orwena's back. You'll remember from The War Within. And she's like, oh no, the plants and stuff, like the black blood. Yeah, it's like that. And then it'll divert off and it'll be like, hang on a minute, there's actual Xal'atath infiltration. So Xal'atath is desperately not only trying to just nuke the Sunwell, but at the same time, she has infiltration and things going on around the area that are trying to manipulate and work their way in from the inside. So trying to poison things and get things shut down. All that is happening. Now, that's your main throughput. Couple of things to note here is dungeon quests do still exist. I've got to say, if they were going to do a nostalgia hit like this, and you guys will be very familiar with it when you start playing it, is I would really have loved a return to proper dungeon quests that we had in the Burning Crusade. If you've played through the Burning Crusade, you would know you would go to various areas and you would just get a bunch of dungeon quests to do. This made, for me, doing dungeons a really exciting moment in the leveling process. You would end up with like 4 or 5 dungeon quests. You really wanted to get that done. Incentivized a lot of people to jump into dungeons. I know they don't need that too much anymore with the queue system. But either way, it's always a big rewarding experience to go through the dungeon, get a bunch of quests, and just get like guaranteed items at the end of it, because the quest would reward some really good loot, and a nice chunky, healthy amount of experience to come out of it. This time around, your first dungeon quest is probably going to be Murder Row. You're not going to get that until like halfway through the zone, and then it's not even going to label itself really as a dungeon quest unless you check the little icon. Instead of it, usually you just went dungeon and then the name of the quest. It's going to pick up at the end of a story thread, and I know Blizzard is working very hard to get the story to be something people can be engaged with and enjoy. I understand that, but I would also just like some dungeon quests to go along with that. I love turning in 4 or 5 dungeon quests. A good, successful dungeon run while leveling, I think, is a really fun time. And good rewards coming out of it. It doesn't need to be like half a level of experience like we used to get, but like some definite solid loot upgrades, things along those lines are always really nice. I would like to have seen that, and maybe they could still implement that because it's a bit of fun. I did not like the Cataclysm style where the quest was like automatic. Some of you will remember this. It kind of just randomly updated as you went through the dungeon. Give me like 4 or 5 things to do in my first dungeon run. It allows me to explore the dungeon a little bit more, keep my eyes open, certainly in preparation for the inevitable Mythic Plus that's coming later on. Similar with delves. The delves are there, But instead of Donegal, where they were like, hey, you've done 3 quests, let's show you delves. Here's a new feature. Delves have been around for a while. They're sticking around, obviously. This time you get them like right at the end, like 3/4 of the way through the zone. I actually thought they'd just almost ignored them and be like, yeah, you guys know delves exist. We don't need to do anything else. They do have to still bear in mind there are new players who are going to be joining at midnight. There are always new players pouring into World of Warcraft. And this time around, they're going to do delves way, way later. Not until you get down to the gloomy area will it be like, and here's a delve, and you'll meet Valera. And she'll be like, let's go in here and do a delve thing. And I was like, oh, they're still doing delve quests. All right, that's cool. What about mega stories? Like Donegal, I really liked. Not at first. At first it was like Zone the Zone. This feels a bit like that too. But then you started to uncover like 1 or 2 big quest threads that actually led to some really nice outcomes that people still talk about to this day. When I asked Maria about it, it was like, yeah, we're trying to do a lot more of that and keep it quite mature. Haven't really found it yet. I've done practically everything I could find in this zone. And there are some decent ones for sure. Like especially trying to establish like the different stations people have within Silvermoon and the smuggling operations. They're really trying to paint it more like Dalaran. If you remember Dalaran having like the underbelly where there was all sorts of seedy people and brokers, and this is where the black markets were, they're trying to do that with Murder Row, is create this area where this is where all the snitches and the rats and the all the dark things happen. That's there a little bit, but what I'm not getting is a super emotional connection. And I looked for it as well. I'm not finding that's very emotional connection. What I am finding is very similar, coming back to it, full circle, is TBC stuff where there's a few quests like on the map that aren't part of the main story thread. If you grab them and just go and do them, that's kind of a silly thing to do because more of that area will open up later. If anything, if this continues on, the best advice I can give you when you get to Eversong is if you're anywhere near some quests on the map, pick them up, just don't do them yet. Because your main story is going to kind of loop around and then be like, oh, you have 3 quests for this area? Well, guess what? The main story just gave you 2 more. And then you're just going to get a bunch of stuff done instead of repeating areas over and over again. And I feel like that's what they want from you. There is some cool stuff. It's like some fishing. There's some fun stuff that you'd expect from WoW, like dealing with influencers and all that kind of stuff. I felt like exposed in certain areas, but also trying to teach you stuff. The fishing one in particular is like, you should learn midnight fishing for this quest, and then you'll get a whole quest line out of it that's nothing to do with fishing, and it won't be the standard type of fishing where you're like waiting 5 minutes for the one you actually need to pop up. They're just teaching you the profession, and then they're going to give you a quest line in the back of it, which I think is really nice. I think that's a great way of doing things. So far, I feel better about this zone than I did about Eversong, than Donegal. I feel much better about this zone. The initial zone of the War Within made me go, okay, it's World of Warcraft. This is definitely that, but it's got much more color, much more vibrance, and much more interesting things happening. But it does lack the top end for me so far. It can't reach the high heights just yet. But I didn't realize that until much later with that zone either, so that could be an opinion that changes over time. So Eversong Woods, ladies and gentlemen, your first zone. Next week we have Silvermoon. Remember, this is going into a Wrath of the Lich King style leveling process where once you've done this first zone, you'll have a choice of 3 to go to. They are not making it linear. Right, you won't go A, B, C, D, E. You'll go to A, and then you get your choice of B, C, D. Where do you want to go? You can go over here. You can go over to here, deal with the Harrenhal. You can deal with some really old school stuff with Arator, or you can go to Silvermoon and deal with some troll power. So the troll zone is up next. Looking forward to it. Really good. See you next week on that one. Bye, guys.